Hello friends, so in this section we are going to discuss the physiology of hearing. We already discussed the physiology of vision in the last part, so now let us move to physiology of hearing. In order to understand hearing, we should have some knowledge about the anatomy of ear, because hearing is the function of the ear. Ear performs function of hearing as well as equilibrium. So this is the structure of the external ear. The structure I am drawing is the pinna. So this is the external ear, and the function of external ear is that the sound waves which come from various sources, they are received by the external ear. The external auditory canal is a part of external ear, and it goes medially into the skull and extends till the tympanic membrane. So this convex structure here is the tympanic membrane. Now this is the inner ear. So inner ear consists of two parts. This part of inner ear is called as the cochlea, which is a highly coiled structure. It consists of almost 2.75 tons, and in the upper part of cochlea are the semicircular canals, which are bony structures, and inside them are the semicircular ducts, which are part of membranous labyrinth. So this is the inner part of inner ear, which is called as the cochlea, and above are the semicircular canals, and this is the cochlear nerve. Now between these two structures is the middle ear. Now middle ear contains bones which are called as ear ossicles. So this first ossicle is the malleus, which is attached to tympanic membrane. Second ossicle is the incus, and it is attached to the stapes. So third ossicle is the stapes. Now stapes opens in the inner ear through oval window. So these are the bones of the skull which protect the ear. So this is the temporal bone of the skull. So and below these are other bones, and above the ear there will be the gyri and sulci of the brain. So above this ear is the part of the brain. So these are gyri and sulci of the brain. So this is a rough diagram of the ear. So the outer part, which consists of pinna and the external auditory canal, this part is called as the external ear. Now after external ear there is this middle ear. Now this tube-like structure is called a eustachian tube, which connects middle ear to the pharynx, and this inner part is called as the inner ear, which consists of two parts. One part is the cochlea and other is the vestibular apparatus. So this is the pinna, this is the external auditory canal, which are the parts of external ear. This is the middle ear, eustachian tube, and this is cochlea, and these are the semicircular canals. They are mainly associated with the function of balance. So these are all the structures in the ear that we should be aware of. Now this part between external ear and middle ear is called as the tympanic membrane. Tympanic membrane also plays an important role in hearing. We'll discuss in a few moments. So whenever sound waves are received, they are received by the external ear. From the external ear, these sound waves travel through the external auditory canal, and then they are conducted through these bones, that's malleus, incus, and stapes in the middle ear, and then these sound waves, they are transmitted to the inner ear through the oval window. So this is the oval window, and below oval window there is another window called as round window. So the foot plate of stapes, it binds to the oval window of the inner ear. However, this is a loose connection. A ligament is present there, and it is responsible for conducting these impulses to the inner ear cochlea. Now this cochlea is a tubular, highly coiled structure, which is the main organ of hearing. It's the main the receptor part of for hearing is present in the cochlea. So in order to have an understanding of the working of cochlea, we just consider a schematic diagram in which we uncoil this cochlea. So if we uncoil this cochlea, we'll get this cochlea like straightened out. Now if we take a look in the interior of cochlea, so this is this cochlea after unwinding it. It itself in the inner side, it consists of three different tubes. So it's made up of like three different tubes. So one tube is which starts from the oval window. So oval window leads into a tube which is called as the scala vestibuli. So this is the upper tube, it's called scala vestibuli, middle tube and the lower tube. Now upper tube and the lowermost tube, they are continuous with each other at the end. So upper tube is called, so there are three tubes present inside the cochlea, and they are divided by two membranes. So upper tube is called as the scala vestibuli, the middle tube is called as the scala media, and the lower tube is called as the scala tympani. Now these three tubes, they are filled with fluid. So the upper tube, that scala vestibuli, it's filled with a fluid. So these are oval window and round window which lead into scala vestibuli and scala tympani. So scala vestibuli is filled with a fluid which is called as perilymph, and so is scala tympani. So both these are filled with a fluid called as perilymph. Perilymph is similar to extracellular fluid, especially CSF, and it's rich in sodium ions. The scala media, that is the middle tube, it's filled with a special fluid which is called as endolymph. So endolymph is a special fluid which is present only in the scala media, and it is rich in potassium ions. The importance of this fluid is that it is rich in potassium ions. It's a unique feature of endolymph. Now why this endolymph is present only in the scala media, we'll discuss in a few moments. So if we cut the section of this cochlea, it will appear to be circular, and inside this circular section there will be three different sections of scala vestibuli, scala tympani, and scala media. So these two membranes, they are the Reisner's membrane and the basilar membrane. So in the section, this upper membrane is the Reisner's membrane and lower membrane is the basilar membrane. This is the cut section of cochlea. So the upper tube, this is called as the scala vestibuli. Middle tube is the scala media, and this scala media contains endolymph because it is lined by special cells. These cells are called as stria vascularis. So stria vascularis are responsible for formation of this fluid called as endolymph, and the characteristic of this fluid is that it is rich in potassium ions, so it contains large amount of potassium ions. Middle one is the scala media, which is filled with endolymph, and in the lower one is the scala tympani, which is again filled with the perilymph. So it is these stria vascularis which are responsible for formation of endolymph, which are rich in potassium ions, and because of these potassium ions, this endolymph always has a potential which is called a voltage which is called as endolymphatic potential, which is a positive potential because of these potassium ions, and it measures around plus 80 millivolts. Again, it's because of these potassium ions. Now, on the basilar membrane, the main sensory part which is associated with hearing is present, which is called as the organ of Corti. So, organ of Corti is present on the basilar membrane. It contains special sensory cells which are known as hair cells, and other than hair cells, it also contains some supporting cells. So, there are supporting cells present between hair cells. These supporting cells are also called as diater cells. So it contains two cells, hair cells and the supporting cells. So in this diagram, if we want to show these cells, so on the basilar membrane, these are the hair cells, these are again hair cells, and in between these hair cells are the supporting cells, are the dietic cells. So this is organ of Corti, which is present on the basilar membrane in the inner ear. Now from the basilar membrane, another membrane arises just before the organ of Corti, and it goes above the organ of Corti. It is a gelatinous membrane, so that the stereocilia present on the top of hair cells, they are embedded in this gelatinous membrane. This membrane is called as tectorial membrane. So tectorial membrane, these structures are all present in the scala media. Now if we take a look at the section of cochlea again, so this is the section of cochlea, this is Reisner's membrane, and this is the basilar membrane. So this is scala media, which is filled with endolymph rich in potassium ions, because of which there is a positive potential of plus 80 millivolts, which is called as endolymphatic potential. Now on the basilar membrane, the special structures are present which are called the organ of Corti, which contains the sensory cells called the hair cells, which contain cilia on top. So these are scala vestibuli and scala tympani. So these hair cells which contain cilia on top, and this is the tectorial membrane in which the hair cells lie embedded. Tectorial membrane, and these cells, they are innervated by nerve endings, so which together form the cochlear part of the vestibulocochlear nerve, and they carry impulses to other centers which are associated with hearing. So if we take a look at these hair cells present in the organ of Corti, these hair cells can be of two types. So if this is the basilar membrane, these hair cells can be divided into two different types. So these are hair cells of one type, and these are outer hair cells. So one group of hair cells is present on the inner side, and another is present on the outer side. The hair cells present on the outer side, they are called as outer hair cells, and the hair cells present on inner side are called inner hair cells. Now as it's clear from the diagram, inner hair cells are less in number as compared to outer hair cells. So outer hair cells are more in number, and these are the supporting cells between outer and inner hair cells. So this is the deitic cell. Now these hair cells are innervated by nerve fibers. How inner hair cells are less in number, however their nervous innervation is very high as compared to outer hair cells. So inner hair cells are less in number, but they contribute more towards the process of hearing as they are highly innervated by nerve fibers. Outer hair cells are less innervated in comparison to inner hair cells. Okay, so these are the hair cells. Now hair cells, they have hair-like structures called stereocilia on the top of them, and each hair cell does not just have one stereocilia, it is just the diagrammatic representation. There are a large number of stereocilia present on each hair cell. So outer hair cells, they are more sensitive to damage as they can easily be easily exposed, and this damage is called as ototoxicity. So it can be caused by various agents such as aminoglycosides. So aminoglycosides, they can cause ototoxicity, that is damage of these outer hair cells. Now on one hair cell, these cilia are present, stereocilia. It's these cilia which are mainly responsible for generation of action potential. So if this is the top of a hair cell, these stereocilia are arranged in a particular fashion. One of the cilia is the largest in size. It's called as kinocilium. Okay, this cilia is called as kinocilium, which is present at one end, kinocilium. Other cilia, they decrease in size, and they are present adjacent to kinocilium, and they go on decreasing as we move away from kinocilium. They are called as stereocilia. So we have kinocilium, which is the largest cilium, and stereocilia. These are present on the top of a hair cell. Now if there is movement of stereocilia towards the kinocilium, whenever sound waves enter into the inner ear, they cause vibrations of the basilar membrane, because of which these hair cells move, these stereocilia and hair cells move. So if there is movement of cilia towards the kinocilium, that results in opening of potassium channels. Now normally whenever there is opening of potassium channels anywhere in the body, that causes potassium efflux, which results in hyperpolarization. However, in this case, since these cells lie embedded in the endolymph, which is very rich in potassium ions, so potassium ions enter into these cells, which causes potassium influx. So this potassium influx here is responsible for depolarization. It's a very unique phenomena. This depolarization is because of potassium influx. So if these stereocilia move away from kinocilium, then that phenomena, that will be opposite of this, that is responsible for hyperpolarization. Okay, this potassium influx causes depolarization. These currents, they are called as inward potassium currents. They are called as inward potassium currents. They are responsible for depolarization, which produce the signal, and this signal goes to the other centers of the brain associated with hearing. So depolarization is necessary for hearing. It's an important phenomenon. These waves of depolarization can actually be measured. These waves of depolarization can actually be measured in these in the outer hair cells. So in the outer hair cells, these waves of depolarization can be measured, and this method is used for performing a particular type of sensory test, in which we test whether a baby can hear, he has developed the ability to hear or not. This test is called as autoacoustic emission test. This is called as autoacoustic emission test, and these waves of depolarization in these outer hair cells, they are called as Kemp waves. Okay, a special name given to them on the after the name of the scientist. They are called as Kemp waves. So these depolarization waves are mainly responsible for generation of action potential, which is propagated along the auditory pathway and reaches higher centers in the brain, mainly the auditory cortex. Now whenever sound comes from some source, this sound is received by the external ear. It goes through the external auditory canal, and as it strikes the tympanic membrane, it causes vibrations in the tympanic membrane, and these vibrations are then propagated to the ossicles of the middle ear. Now middle ear performs a very important function. It conducts these sound waves to the inner ear. It performs important function of amplification of sound. In the middle ear, sound is amplified 22 times, and the main reasons responsible for this amplification, so the first reason is the area. So if we see, when sound waves strike the tympanic membrane, from tympanic membrane these waves are conducted to the malleus. The area of contact between malleus and tympanic membrane is large. On the other hand, the area of contact between the foot plate of stapes and the oval window is small, so the sound gets amplified while entering the inner ear, and this amplification is 2.2 times. Another mechanism is that these ossicles themselves act as lever. So by lever mechanism, the amplification is almost 10 times, and the total amplification is 2.2 times 10, that's 22 times. So in the middle ear, the sound gets amplified 22 times before entering into the inner ear. Now once sound enters in the inner ear, it enters through the oval window, so it causes vibrations in the perilymph, and these vibrations also exert some pressure on the endolymph. Now these vibrations also reach the scala tympani again through the common pathway, as they are connected to each other, scala vestibular and scala tympani. Now because of these vibrations, there are vibrations in the basilar membrane. So these vibrations in basilar membrane cause movement of these stereocilia on the hair cells, and if movement occurs towards the kinocilium, that results in opening of potassium channels, inward potassium current, depolarization, which generates the signal, and this is then conducted along the auditory pathway to the higher centers of brain, and we are able to hear the different things. So these hair cells then cause depolarization of hair cells, and then through the cochlear nerve, impulses go along the auditory pathway. So now we have to discuss the last section of this topic, that's the auditory pathway and the auditory cortex. So these vibrations, these are the vibrations of the basilar membrane again. So the basilar membrane keeps on vibrating, so it will keep on vibrating till the pressure is not relieved. So we'll hear echoes of sound. So this pressure is relieved through the round window, and we hear just a simple clear sound. Now a question arises in our mind, it should arise in our mind, that how is our brain able to detect the frequency of sound that we hear? So let's say we hear a sound, how is our brain able to tell whether it has a high frequency or it has low frequency? So this is explained on the basis of a theory which is called as the traveling wave theory. Okay, it's called as the traveling wave theory, and this theory was given by a scientist called as Betsy. Okay, it's the traveling wave theory of Betsy. So according to this theory, the sound waves, they cause vibrations in the basilar membrane. So sound waves, they travel along the basilar membrane and they cause vibrations in the basilar membrane. Now these vibrations of basilar membrane play a very important role in deciding whether the sound has a high frequency or low frequency. It depends on the location of these vibrations in the basilar membrane. So if these no so let us say there can be a high frequency sound, or there can be a low frequency sound, high frequency sound or a low frequency sound. When the frequency of the sound is high, the vibrations in the basilar membrane are better, they are more prominent in the base of the cochlea. So now we discuss cochlea as a straight tube, however actually cochlea is a coiled structure, and the part of the cochlea in the base, so basilar membrane will be present throughout the structure. So basilar membrane present at the base of cochlea, it will undergo better vibrations when the sound has high frequency. So whenever the vibrations come from the base of cochlea, then our brain automatically detects the sound as a high frequency sound. On the other hand, if the vibrations are better in the apex of the cochlea, or the upper part of cochlea, the top of cochlea, then the sound is automatically detected as a low frequency sound. So this is how the brain is able to identify the frequency of the sound that we hear. Now if we hear a sound which has very high frequency, that means if we hear a very loud sound, rather a very loud noise, now it can damage the tympanic membrane of our ear. So normally a sound up to 120 decibels, it cannot cause damage to the tympanic membrane. However, if a sound has more intensity than 120 decibels, it can cause damage to the tympanic membrane. Let us say we hear a very loud sound of 160 decibels. Now this sound, as it reaches the tympanic membrane, after the tympanic membrane, we'll be able to hear a sound of only 120 decibels. Now this decrease in the intensity of the sound, decrease in loudness of the sound, will be automatically caused as a reflex activity. So sound will be attenuated, so we'll be able to hear only 120 decibel sound, which cannot cause damage to the tympanic membrane. It cannot cause damage to the tympanic membrane. This is called as the attenuation reflex, and since stapedius muscle plays a very important role in this reflex is also called as stapedial reflex. So this reflex occurs mainly because of contraction of stapedius muscle. Now let us try to trace the pathway of this reflex. So whenever the efferents come, they come through the 8th cranial nerve, that's through the vestibulocochlear nerve. From the eighth cranial nerve, these impulses go to the superior olivary nucleus. Superior olivary nucleus is the main center for this reflex. From superior olivary nucleus, the efferents go to the seventh cranial nerve, that is the facial nerve. And since facial nerve provides motor supply to stapedius, therefore it results in contraction of stapedius. And when stapedius contracts, it results in retraction of the tympanic membrane. And if tympanic membrane is retracted, it means it will not be able to conduct better, so automatically the loudness of the sound is going to decrease, and it's a protective reflex called as attenuation reflex or stapedial reflex. So this is the pathway of stapedial reflex from 8th cranial nerve, superior olivary nucleus, facial nerve, and stapedius muscle. Now, in case of lesion of facial nerve, this stapedial reflex will not be able to operate properly. As a result, the person will hear very loud sounds, which will be louder than the normal. So this condition is called as hyperacusis. Hyperacusis is seen in case of lesion of 7th cranial nerve or facial nerve. Now, now we go to the last section of the physiology of hearing, that's the auditory pathway. So in order to understand auditory pathway, let's draw some sections of the brainstem as well as the cerebrum. So this is the section of medulla at the level of superior olivary nucleus. So this is the section of medulla at the level of superior olivary nucleus. Now let me the inner structures. So this is the superior olivary nucleus and this superior olivary nucleus of other side. Now it also contains the cochlear nuclei, which are the dorsal and the ventral cochlear nuclei. So let's label them. This is superior olivary nucleus, this is the ventral and the dorsal cochlear nuclei. Now above the section of medulla, let's draw the section of the midbrain. So this is the section of a midbrain at the level of inferior colliculus. So this is the aqueduct and this is the inferior colliculus. So this is the section of midbrain at the level of inferior colliculus. Now there are various pathways, there are various fibers which go in an ascending manner, among which one of the pathways is called the lateral lemniscal pathway. We'll get to that in a few moments. So above, this is the part of the cerebrum, this is the coronal section of the cerebrum, this is lateral sulcus. So again, this is cerebrum, this is the lateral sulcus, and below it is the superior temporal gyrus. This is the fornix, this is fourth ventricle, and on each side of fourth ventricle there is thalamus. So these are the two thalami. So this is the thalamus of one side, and of the other side this gyrus is the superior temporal gyrus. Again, this is the superior temporal gyrus. Now whenever sound waves produce action potential in the hair cells, that action potential eventually goes to the cochlear nerve, which is a part of 8th cranial nerve. So this action potential depolarization, there's action potential generated here which goes through the cochlear nerve. Now this cochlear nerve is a part of 8th cranial nerve, that is vestibulocochlear nerve. Now the fibers of this nerve, they go to the cochlear nuclei which are present in the medulla. So this is the 8th cranial nerve, that's vestibulocochlear nerve. So let us on the sideways, let us trace the pathway. This is the 8th cranial nerve. From 8th cranial nerve, these fibers go to the, some go to the dorsal and some go to the ventral cochlear nuclei. So both the cochlear nuclei are involved, and from these cochlear, so from 8th cranial nerve to the cochlear nuclei, from cochlear nuclei, fibers go to the superior olivary nucleus, and there is crossing of fibers. They can go to superior olivary nucleus of other side or of the same side. Superior olivary nucleus. From superior olivary nucleus, fibers go to the midbrain, that is inferior colliculus, and the pathway, the ascending path they follow is called as the lateral lemniscus. So fibers go in upward direction, and this is these fibers, they form lateral lemniscus. So this is the lateral lemniscus. This is on one side and same on the other side. So from superior olivary nucleus, fibers go through the lateral lemniscus to the inferior colliculus of the midbrain. Inferior colliculus. Now from inferior colliculus, fibers go to the medial geniculate body of the thalamus. So this is medial geniculate body of the thalamus. And from medial geniculate body of the thalamus, fibers form the auditory radiation and go to the auditory cortex, which is present in the superior temporal gyrus. So from medial geniculate body, fibers form the auditory radiation and go to the auditory cortex present in the superior temporal gyrus. Now all these these various stages, they can be remembered by a simple acronym, that's ECO-LIMA. So E is the eighth cranial nerve, C is the cochlear nucleus, O is superior olivary nucleus, L is lateral lemniscus, I inferior colliculus, M is middle geniculate body, and A is the auditory cortex. So ECO-LIMA. Now some other points, superior olivary nucleus as well as inferior colliculus, both of them are associated with the direction of sound waves. So we are able to appreciate the direction from the sound waves are coming because of these nuclei, that is superior olivary nucleus and the inferior colliculus. Auditory cortex, it's the part of the cerebral cortex. It is located in the superior temporal gyrus. Superior temporal gyrus at the Brodmann area 41 is the exact location of the auditory cortex. Brodmann area 41. Now this superior temporal gyrus is also called as, it has another name, it's also called as Hessel's gyrus. Hessel's gyrus. So this is the auditory pathway. I hope you guys liked this video. So please share and subscribe.